Welcome to the Tackling Tech podcast, powered by Dyknow. Join us as we tackle all things EdTech with insightful interviews, actionable tips, and strategies that you can implement in your school or district to make technology integration more effective. Whether you're a teacher, a tech coach, or a technology administrator, we're giving you an advantage in your role by sharing stories from people who are passionate about working with their peers and enhancing the learning experience with technology. Thanks for spending some time with us today. Now let's tackle some tech.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Tackling Tech, a podcast that shares stories about how you can build better collaboration in K-12 schools, and a show that is dedicated to putting a voice to remote learning. I am Brett McGrath, Vice President of Marketing at Dyknow, your host. Hopefully you're all having a good start to your day as you're listening to this. I am looking outside on a Monday morning as I record this, and it is a gloomy, dark fall day in Indianapolis. A lot of rain going on here. Hopefully this turns around. Got some extra coffee. Hopefully you are having a good start to your day and your school year, whether it's in person, virtual, or maybe a hybrid. It's just incredible how many conversations I've been having with educators from all over the country and the different learning environments everyone's dealing with and the circumstances that they have in front of you. And I think the powerful thing about this period of time is that it is a really good time where we can reflect and share and learn from others. And that's what we're trying to do here on Tackling Tech. Definitely, before we jump into the conversation, want to make sure you all are subscribed to Tackling Tech. So if you think we're doing a good job and you're learning something, hit that subscribe button. Leave us a review. That would be awesome. That helps get the show out to more people. We do appreciate that. Make sure you're following the podcast at Tackling Tech Pod on Twitter. Follow Dyknow too. We're pumping out a lot of content at Dyknow. You can follow us on Instagram too at Dyknow_K12. We're doing more and more on the Instagram front. We're also focusing a lot on YouTube. So if you prefer video, go check out the Dyknow YouTube channel. We just ran a promotion where we gave away a virtual learning starter kit to a teacher with a Canon PowerShot. And really what we were trying to do there is make sure that everyone was engaged with our content on YouTube. And then we also said thank you by giving a camera away to make a teacher's virtual learning experience that much better. So we're going to be doing a lot of that stuff. We've got more digital events coming up, more to announce there soon. And we're just dedicated to continuing to use all of these digital channels to share stories that we believe in. And today is certainly one of those people and stories that we believe in. I've got Noah Geisel on the show. He is an expert on digital badging and digital badge credentials. So we talk about equity, access, opportunity, human-centered design. He created an event, the Badge Summit, and we talk a little bit about that. But really the conversation is to talk about the achievement gap and how we can solve for that. I had a ton of fun talking with Noah. He's certainly a passionate individual. Let's sit back, relax, and kick it to the conversation. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Tackling Tech. I am excited about this conversation and today's guest. I am joined by Noah Geisel, who is a teacher, EdTech coach, trainer, speaker, you name it, and specifically an expert on digital badge credentials. I have learned a lot about digital badge credentials and the importance in education just in my research and listening to different conversations Noah has had and videos on YouTube. So I'm excited to bring some of his insight and knowledge to you all. Without further ado, Noah, how are you doing today?
Hey, Brett, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be recording with you today. For folks who aren't live with us, it's Indigenous Peoples Day, so definitely trying to be thoughtful about that and spend some of my day learning and just processing what that means.
Yeah, no, thank you for calling that out. And I think that I have picked up from you and what you're about. You're definitely very thoughtful when it comes to just equity, access, opportunity, and all of that. So I'm excited to dive in and just definitely thank you for the call out there. One thing I wanted to just jump in right off the top is I think this is important and it's a really good time to talk about it. But you had a really insightful tweet that I saw. Your tweet was, school and district leaders often proclaim that our people are the most valuable resource, and now is a really good time for them to be deliberate in walking the talk, because their action or inaction is clearly showing just how valued their people are. And I think people are everything in life and school and business and whatever field you're in. And that tweet of yours really stuck out for me. So I'm curious, just maybe talk us through, where did it come from and what was the inspiration behind it?
Where it came from, to be honest, Brett, is a sense that, we are doing a really great job in the profession of education of thinking about students during this pandemic and, putting their needs, first and foremost, which is exactly what we should be doing. And at the same time, I think that there's a real glaring lack of intentionality, at least in a lot of the conversations that I'm privy to and eavesdropping on social media, around, being intentional with essentially SEL for adults, right? That we have teachers, we have staff members, and, when they are burned out, they're not going to be able to do a great job for the kids that they're leading and serving. And so, I think that's what I was going for, was a provocation to really get people thinking about, as much as you say people are your most important resource, or valuable resource, now's a really good time to show that you value them as people.
Yeah. And I think I love that answer and response. And I think that just in general, this idea of, when we started having conversations on this podcast, it was right at the beginning of COVID. And a lot of the conversations I was having with teachers and tech coaches and administrators centered around this theme of, before we go out and try to figure out how we educate under these circumstances, we really need to think about ourself and take care of ourself first before we think about how we adapt and start educating and taking care of those students. So that tweet definitely stuck out to me, because that's a topic that has been, I think, important in these conversations. And I guess before we jump off that, there's a lot of administrators, people in leadership positions who listen to this podcast and I get feedback on. Do you have any just advice for people in leadership positions within K-12 on things that they might be able to do to start thinking more specifically about, the SEL component of faculty and staff?
Sure. I guess first off, I'm not in that position. And, so I just want to own that. And I'd also say that I think being a school principal, being a district administrator is one of the most difficult and thankless jobs, not just in education, but on planet Earth. And so, I definitely, don't want folks to have the impression that this is all about just throwing them under the bus needlessly. I called it a provocation. Maybe I'd also describe it as an invitation to, be asking that question. I think is the best advice I can give, is what are we doing? How are we doing it? How do we know if it's working? And how do we know if we're doing enough? And, hopefully that leads folks to some uncomfortable thoughts. Hopefully it leads them to some sense of urgency. And if it doesn't, that might be a really good sign that you need to bring in some other people in the room, because that you might have a blind spot that you're oblivious to, that they're going to help you see. That we have adults who are struggling, and, if we want to be there for them, and hopefully we do, that requires us, just being intentional and just asking ourselves the tough questions, and knowing we're going to get it wrong, but knowing that, trying to do something and getting it wrong is a whole lot better than ignoring it.
I couldn't agree more with that. We're going to talk about digital badge credentials, a topic that before I started to dig in, didn't know much about. You certainly have a passion around this topic. You even hold a conference about it, which I find super interesting. Before we get there, though, I want to maybe touch on some higher level themes that I've read just in researching you that will lead us there. But just maybe like these big, broad topics of equity, access, and opportunity. What do kind of each of those topics mean to you, and why are they so important?
That's a really great question. And, I think that especially when it comes to equity, one of the things I've learned is that it is a journey, and there's not a finish line. This is stuff that once you start the work, you will be committed to doing the work, because there's basically a responsibility to do so for the rest of your life. And so for me, part of it is just a constant learning process and asking questions and looking in the mirror and feeling uncomfortable and just constantly trying to do better and, hopefully have an extended hand out to other people who are willing to be pulled, to help them, more easily get through stuff than I did with my own struggles. And so, I just feel that folks who, are either born into privilege or, receiving privilege, the systems works well for us and has always worked well for us and will continue to work really well for us. And if we believe, especially in public education, that it's at its heart about helping us form not just informed, but healthy and successful citizenry that, moving forward, then we just have this obligation to make sure that we're helping to improve a system that works well for everyone, not just the people for whom it was historically created to do right by.
Yeah, that's really good. And that kind of triggers a thought and a theme that has come up in several conversations that, I've had with other educators. And that's about the struggles of this time of learning and then being mindful of all the students and where their background and their resources and what they have. And it's gotten into this whole conversation around the importance of personalized learning. What are your thoughts on just maybe the conversation around personalized learning in education right now? Do you think it's heading in the right direction? Still some opportunities for improvement? What's your thoughts there?
Yeah, and I think anybody who doesn't think that there's, massive opportunities to improve is somebody who probably is not spending a lot of time examining where we are and where we could be. That said, I think that if we look in the rearview mirror, from where we came, we've made monumental progress, right? That certain things that are now considered to be just best practice, you go back 10 years and those might have been kind of, viewed as coming from people wearing tinfoil hats and just speaking totally unrealistically. And so we've come a really long way in realizing that, that we have to engage people as individuals, as humans, and that, part of preparing them for successful futures, especially when we go above knowledge level to skill level stuff and get into the higher, domains of Bloom's taxonomy, that the personalized learning approaches just make sense. It gets really tough to view it as anything other than common sense the more you spend time with it. But, I think you're right, man. Like that we are a very long way away from where we one day will be. But I'm hugely encouraged by what we're seeing. Some of it's on the technology side, but I think a whole lot of it is just on the focus in the profession of paying attention to what works, observing classes, it's kind of just a meme of everything I learned in kindergarten or whatever, but it's true. Like when we go look at kindergarten and first grade teachers and see their stations and see their small group, conferencing, kindergarten and first grade teachers have been, they didn't have these words around what they were doing, but they've basically been showing us the right way to do this, for time eternal.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And that like gets me thinking about something that I've seen attached to you in conversations, but just like this overall theme and process with human-centered design. Can you maybe define that for the audience, and then how human-centered design factors into this kind of broader conversation?
Sure. And, if folks are familiar with design thinking, human-centered design is kind of just a preferred term for me, because it puts the humans at the heart of it. Because, at least in my journey with design thinking, what I've really, thanks to great mentorship, frankly, and folks helping me along the way, I've really seized on empathy as being just the key to how we engage our users. And, we move away from, our own confidence in how smart and brilliant we are, no matter how smart and brilliant we are. We move away from, just patting ourselves on the back for the brilliance of our own ideas. And instead, back up a few steps and say, what are the assumptions we're making here? What is the root, problem? Have we actually identified the root opportunity or problem here? And then, whose problem is that? And are we going to those people and engaging them in empathy conversations and learning about their relationship with that problem, and then starting to get to ideas, that I've learned that no matter how smart I think I am, the greatest contribution I have to these conversations is, bringing sentences that end in question marks, not periods. And so, that to me, at the risk of, being too, high in the sky and not getting into specifics, is really what the human-centered design about it is. It's focusing on humans, focusing on empathy. And I think that, for people who look at that and think, that's touchy-feely, it's frou-frou, the benefit at the end, the end product is you get decisions that stay made. And it's really expensive to have major programs, major initiatives that end up being referred to a few years later as having been a flavor of the week. It's costly in time, it's costly in money, and most importantly, it's costly in morale, right? You just lose people whose buy-in you desperately need. And so, when you start from a place of meeting their needs, you just have decisions that are much more likely to stay made. And so, even if it feels a little, energy crystal-y to some people, maybe that would be the argument I'd make to people is, at the end of the day, this is going to save you money and save you frustration and save you the, just the valuable capital of people buying into what you're selling.
Absolutely. And one of this, I can see it right now, a snippet pulled from this conversation is what you just touched on about making, ending with questions instead of statements. And I just couldn't agree more. Ending in questions continues the conversation and allows others to get their perspective shared and people sharing their views and opinions. And that I'm a firm believer of that, and just think that's so critical. Definitely. And I appreciate you.
Totally.
Yeah. Go. You have a comment on top of that? 'Cause I love that. That just makes so much sense to me, just as a guy who does marketing at a software company that serves the K-12 industry. I've had to learn so much. And instead of going out and making statements, asking questions to learn more, it unlocks the door to just so much cool stuff and so many great conversations. And at the end of it, you end up with an outcome that is far superior to anything else you would have learned or made on your own.
Heck yeah, man. Like 100%. And you just, it's also, I don't want to seem totally altruistic about it. It's at the heart, it's selfish that, I am somebody who likes to learn, and I already know what I think about things. And so, by asking questions, I get to soak stuff in. And, it also makes me a little more, puts a filter in place that if I am telling somebody something, hopefully I'm asking myself, why do they need to know this before I, and not wasting their time. Otherwise, I'd rather stick with asking questions.
Yes, absolutely. Now let's get into the bigger topic, digital badge credentials. Certainly something that is, to me, I think in the conversation here and there, but it's such a specific topic. I think before we get into the what and what it is, I'd love to know your journey and where it came from on how you started to explore digital badge credentials and the importance behind it.
Thanks so much for asking that. I don't know if I've ever gotten to answer that question. And for me, it's super clear where my journey really started with a frustration of where we, the way we use student data. That I think that the way we use student data is very predictable, and it's just basic, and it's, and it's not working. And we know this. And so, we know that grades for the most part in most K-12 situations are not telling a good story of who our learners are as learners and achievers. The test scores are not really that great of an indicator or predictor of future success, and especially if you're not talking about upper middle class white students. And so I really just started with hey, there's all this other data out there that we either are or not collecting, but we're definitely not using it. And so what if we just got smarter with the data we do have? And, this is, probably at this point, a little over 10 years ago that I gave a presentation about this. And, I was looking at things like Class Dojo and how you had these customizable behaviors that you could do plus and minus ones on. And what if instead of just speaks out of turn or raises hand, you started to dig into other things that you think are really important, like asking a follow-up question. And that's so predictive of a really high value skill that, is something that's difficult to automate or outsource. And so it's just these really important skills. And that's just one example that, we could be doing a better job of noticing and recognizing. And, in the case of digital badge credentials, credentialing. And so, I guess I was kind of going down that path when, I intersected with, through social media, the first DML competition, digital media and learning, and they were, knee deep in digital badges. And I said, I'm going to start paying attention to this world. And, as a result of that, I had a conversation with a district chief academic officer where, they said, hey, have you heard of this digital badge credentialing stuff? And I said, actually, yeah, I'm really excited about it. And, because I'd been following it on social media, even though it was in its infancy, I was in a position to probably just say the right things and ask the right questions, to where it led to me being hired on as a consultant as a district doing digital badge consulting kind of before that was a thing, and helping to build what, I think is, a gold standard in how it can be done in K-12, and that's at Aurora Public Schools.
That's awesome. And then I think about just digital badge credentialing, and I think about maybe the teacher that's listening to this conversation and is thinking to herself, I get this. I've been doing research on this. This is something that I want to infuse in my classroom, but I'm not really sure how to get this off the ground. From your perspective, my thoughts are just at a school or district level, there's probably a lot of foundational work that needs to go into place before you just start doing digital badge credentialing. Can you maybe talk through those steps, just so people who are listening who might be interested can have some frame of reference on what to do to get started?
Yeah, I think the first thing to do, whether it's in your classroom or at scale for tens of thousands of users, is to, just know that somebody's going to raise their hand and say, why should I care? And so having a really well articulated why, is crucial. Otherwise, you're going to lose people before you've already started, no matter how, deserving of merit, right, this is. It'll fail if you can't answer the why. I think that, at the classroom level, I think that starting just so small is really going to do yourself favors, because you're going to mess up. You're going to skin up your knees and elbows. And it's just way easier to take an iterative approach where, okay, this is how it went. This is what we've learned from it. This is where we go from here, if you start small. So don't necessarily, maybe, you feel free to dream and create this whole system of layers and pathways. But, when it comes to actually opening it up and debuting it with your students, maybe start with one. It's a lot easier to clean up your mess if you spill a punch glass than a punch bowl. And so, starting small is really helpful. I think that, at the more district scaled level, I think that looking at what other people have done, I think it's Michael Fullen who talks about, other people's arrows have already left the bow. And so go ahead and learn from them so that you can start off closer to where they are than where they were. And, I think that, it's just a fool's errand to not do that, to take advantage of their expertise and just experience. And I think that, I think it's very seductive to focus on the technology. I can't tell you how many times a month folks reach out to me to just say, hey, which platform should we use? Which vendors should we use? And, I'm like, I don't know. What do you need from the vendor? It's just like anything else. It's not just what car should I buy? It's like, well, do you need 4-wheel drive? What kind of safety features do you need? What kind of, how much do you need to be spending each month on insurance? There's all these other factors and functional requirements that are really important to know ahead of time of just what you actually need from the system. Then go out and get the tech, right? But that's one of the biggest mistakes I see people making, is focusing right away on the tech. And I think that going back to decisions not staying made, that's where people buy something based off of basically just the front end UX UI, and not under the hood something that actually is going to meet their needs. And it leads to frustrations down the road, both on the district side but also on the vendor side, where they're like, well, had you told us that's what we needed, we could have told you we don't do that. And so, I think just having a clear idea of what you want from the tech is way more important than knowing what tech you need. And, I think that to that point, focusing on stuff other than the tech in the early days is really important, just focusing on, who do we need at the table? It's not just the kind of coalition of the enthusiastic who should be at the table. It's also, hey, do we need people in, IT at the table? Do we need people from the counseling department here? Think about where this goes down the road. If you're wildly successful, be already writing that press release for 3 years down the road and thinking about, who 3 years from now or a year from now is going to be frustrated with me that they're just now getting invited in to help design this process, and we could have saved everybody a bunch of work if we had included them earlier.
You just hit on the assumptions, some assumptions and a hypothesis we made before we set out for this show. And that was, it's not about the technology and trying to fit in the technology to your school, classroom, or district or whatever. What it's really about first is the conversations, the alignment, and the collaboration with internal stakeholders to get everyone at the right table and start talking about what is needed and get everyone's views and opinions, and then start coming to some conclusions where then once you have some process and a system in place, then you apply the technology over the top, and that just enhances everything that the school are doing on digital badging, on, what video conferencing solution you're going to use, you name it. So I think that is really cool to hear. I think you're the first person to directly state that on this show, but really encouraging to hear that response.
Totally, man. How many, teachers are using a product in their school and just thinking to themselves, who got a steak dinner out of this?
Totally.
A lot of times that's the intentionality. Somebody was at, EBTC or ISTE in the exhibitor hall and they got taken out to dinner. And now, we have thousands of teachers who are using this product that, somebody who doesn't actually have to use this product made that decision for us instead of with us. It's the difference of doing something for people or to people. And, it just going back to that empathy thing. If you're doing something for people, it tends to go over a lot better than if you're doing it to people.
Yes, I could not agree any more than what you just said there. Okay, so maybe we talk about, I'd love to hear just success stories and anything that stands out for you in terms of situations where you've seen from infancy all the way to becoming a thing within a school where a digital badge credentials has taken off, and there's been some really cool success stories from it.
Sure. Two of the biggest ones is, outside schools. I think Salesforce, which is a massive company, if you've never heard of them, and, they have issued literally millions of digital badge credentials without any marketing. Their users are coming and seeking their credentials because they need them in the real world. And these are people who make, a lot of money. These are not blue collar jobs. These are, high level consulting jobs, and they have to have these credentials in order for the client to know that they're able to do what the client needs them to do inside the Salesforce software. IBM is doing this internally in really powerful ways that, going back to your idea of equity, that you are going to help them identify internally who are the right people for a given project in a way that's blind to factors like race, last name, and gender, and just who you already know. And so, which are, tend to be highly influenced by race, gender, and last name. And so, it's just such a powerful tool for equity that we're already seeing in the real world. And that's one of the things that, beyond just the successes that make me so confident that, we're beyond any sort of risk factor of digital badge credentials being a flavor of the week in K-12 or even higher ed. It is the future. It's going to be ubiquitous. And it's just a matter of, if your organization or institution is going to be on the leading edge of it or later on the adopting edge of it, which, and they're both, there's a place for both, but there's certainly, especially in the districts that serve underserved students, there might be real advantages to helping students get ahead if they're the ones who are applying to colleges in this world, where, California probably, they aren't requiring ACT, SAT scores for students who started this fall, and they probably did a really good job still forming great classes, in their admissions department. And so moving forward, maybe they don't require those ACT, SATs, and they're going to need other factors to see who the students are and districts that are offering their students digital badge credentials probably are going to be giving their kids a leg up, at least in the short term, before the other districts catch up. Another just super specific concrete example that I love is an organization called Realworks, REEL, Realworks out of New York City. They do filmmaking with students. So they're not a school-based organization, they're a community organization, but they work with students, and they are trusted on the industry side. And so they're doing all these filmmaking skills, but also skills that you need in order to work in the film industry. So entry-level stuff like how do you answer the phone, project management stuff, not all just technology stuff. And they're credentialing these students on it, and they have audience, they have endorsers and consumers of the badges that have names like Viacom and Universal Studios, right? That are where you need to go to get a foot in the door in this industry, and in an industry where usually that means getting an unpaid internship, which means you have to be able to afford to work for free, which a lot of students can't. Realworks is all of a sudden credentialing students, and then on the industry side, they're saying, hey, we trust you that these students have these skills, and so we are going to not just create internship opportunities and entry-level opportunities for them, we're going to pay them because they can't afford to work for free. And so that to me is, a massive success story. And, it happened not just with some school, after school service provider, knocking on doors, but leveraging these powerful relationships with industry as well as, directly with the New York City mayor's office. And so, when I see stuff like that, that we can look to of just amazing examples of success, it gives me hope. It inspires me. It only, lights the fires of my enthusiasm even more than they already are. And, I just think that we're going to go from a place of a lot of people saying, what are digital badge credentials, to a place where people, just have pages and pages and pages of case studies of successes to point to.
Yeah, and there's a lot of validation there for what you said, mentioning Salesforce, mentioning Viacom, big companies that are seeing value and knowing that it's probably not going to be a flavor of the week thing. And you've probably understood that it's not a flavor of the week thing, probably not only from your dedication and, passion behind this, but then you've also have a conference and the Badge Summit that, is an annual thing where more and more people, I'm sure, are coming to this conference. There's the conversation around digital badge credentials, and there's more further validation from people that have been doing it for a while and new people entering digital badge credentialing. Maybe we can close out with talking about just the conference, how it came to be, and what you've learned as you've put in time, energy, and effort into it over the years.
Yeah, and that time, energy, and effort is something that I guess is worth being transparent about. The caveat to everything I've just said is that I'm somebody who's bet his career on this not being a flavor of the week. So everybody wants to doubt it. Yeah, there's my bias, right? But it's also I just can't see any other future that doesn't include this as one of the right answers of how we go about recognizing people and telling the stories of who they are as learners and achievers. The Badge Summit started as part of what was called a commitment to action plan, which was something that was required by attendees at the Clinton Global Initiative meeting, which is something that you don't apply to. It's invite only, and through the work with Aurora Public Schools, somehow got on their radar, and so was invited to attend the Clinton Global Initiative meeting. Wrote up this commitment to action plan in collaboration with their amazing staff. And part of that was, as we get this work going in Aurora Public Schools, let's not have it be in a silo. Let's offer a, symposium where we share, hey, here's what we're doing. And so, in executing that, we started to put out the word, hey, if people want to come learn about this, we're going to do it. And, people started to come out of the woodwork to say, hey, can we present at that? Can we share our work too? And we said, well, yeah. And so this really just grassroots organic effort came together where we had, like I mentioned, IBM, somebody from IBM emailed us saying, hey, Noah, can I present at this conference you're putting on? I was like, yeah, IBM, you can. And it's just this amazing, convening where you have folks who a lot of times aren't at the same conference. And if they are at the same conference, they're not in the same room, right? We have, folks who are, first grade teachers in the same room as people who are, college provosts and, industry product designers. And, that just brings together all these kind of disparate stakeholders who are, at the heart of it, all on the same page of what they're trying to do for learners and adults as well, right? And so that the conference we just had the 5th conference, so it's been going 5 years, and we've had everybody from, like I said, people talking more gamification or skills-based stuff in K-12, higher ed, these high tech employers, but also the National Hardwood Flooring Association. So not just these high tech white collar jobs, but also, blue collar stuff and badges for first responders. There's a lot of crossover into the blockchain space for, people who are excited about that. And, it just continues to be a source of just a sense of being a part of something. It doesn't feel like a normal conference. It feels like you're a part of something that everybody there is this dreamer, who's just onto something big. And it's been neat over the years to just see that, people collide at the conference, and a year and a half later, they're releasing something cool into the world that they're building. And, it's because they met in the hallway at this conference, or, this year with the virtual one in the, digital hallway.
I love the story. I love all the passion behind this topic. Noah, where can people come find you and learn more about your work online?
Yeah, I blog medium.com @SeniorG. My Twitter handle @SeniorG, SENORG. That's the quickest and easiest place to get a hold of me. I occasionally check email, noah@thebadgesummit.com. And I'll also have a new email address here. Maybe by the time this podcast comes out, I'm starting a new position as the manager of micro-credentials at University of Colorado, the CU Boulder campus. So hopefully I'm easy to find online. And also, if you're ever in Colorado, I'm easy to find in person. Let's hang out.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Hopefully you all learned something from this conversation. I know I did. Noah, we'll talk to you again real soon.
Brett, thank you so much for the opportunity to learn and share with you and your audience.
I love having conversations with people that are experts on areas that I am interested in and don't know much about, and that certainly was what I picked out of the conversation from Noah. He is an expert at digital badge credentials, got ahead of the curve. I like it how he used Salesforce as an example, a company I used to work for, so that was certainly cool. Go follow Noah. You'll learn a ton, I promise you. If you like what you heard, hit that subscribe button. Definitely follow us on social. We'll be continuing to pump out more and more really good content that hopefully inspires you and something that you're enjoying on a week-to-week basis. Take care of yourself, take care of others around you, and we'll talk to you real soon.